There is a book almost nobody talks about, yet it quietly influenced more deaths than any novel, manifesto, religious text, or political document ever written. It wasn't written by a dictator. It wasn't written by a fanatic. It came from a psychologist who believed fear could be created like a recipe, hope could be erased with noise, and the human mind could be reshaped the same way you train a dog. His ideas were published in a simple psychology book, and the world accepted those ideas without understanding the cost. That book led to one of the most disturbing experiments in history, a terrified baby known as Little Albert, and a chain of events that would eventually shape propaganda, manipulation, war, advertising, and mass control. And the death toll that came from this knowledge is so massive, so spread out, and so indirect that most people never realize where it began. This entire story starts with one belief, that humans are born with no real personality at all. JohnBWatson, the father of behaviorism, looked at human beings and saw blank paper. No instincts, no emotions, nothing inborn. He believed everything about you could be shaped, conditioned, and controlled using simple rules. His book, which taught this idea, wasn't written to be dangerous. Watson saw it as a new science, a clean formula that made people predictable. But behind the pages was something darker. If human emotions can be created, then fear can be manufactured. If behavior can be molded, then obedience can be designed. And Watson wanted to prove this in the most extreme way possible. In 1920, Watson entered a hospital and picked a baby for his experiment. The child's real name was Douglas, but Watson stripped him of his identity and replaced it with one label, Little Albert. The baby was 9 months old, calm, curious, and trusting. He wasn't chosen randomly. Watson needed a child who showed no natural fear. And Albert was perfect. When Watson placed a white rat in front of him, Albert touched it with a smile. There was no crying, no hesitation, no fear of any kind. That was the moment Watson decided to break him. Watson believed fear was not something we were born with, but something that could be created. And he planned to create it inside Albert. The next time the baby reached for the rat, Watson struck a steel bar with a hammer right behind Albert's head. The noise exploded like gunshot. Albert froze, then began to cry in terror. Watson watched him closely. This was success. Not moral success. Not scientific success. But success in proving that fear could be installed like a program. The following week, Watson repeated the process. Rat. Hammer. Crying. Rat. Hammer. Crying. Eventually, Albert didn't need the noise anymore. Just seeing the rat made him panic. Watson had created a fear where none existed before. But the damage didn't stop at the rat. Albert now feared anything white and fuzzy. A rabbit, a dog, a fur coat, even a Santa Claus mask with a white beard. Watson had accidentally discovered something worse than artificial fear. He had created emotional contamination. One fear was spreading like a virus, attaching itself to anything vaguely similar. Watson celebrated this. He had taken a human mind and rewritten it. Albert hadn't learned fear. Fear had been forced into him. Installed. Hardwired. And Watson proudly published every detail in his book. People today read the Little Albert experiment and call it cruel. But back then, it was groundbreaking. Watson's book became the foundation of modern behaviorism. The world didn't just accept his ideas, they absorbed them. Governments, armies, advertisers, and corporations all read Watson's work and saw something beyond psychology. They saw a tool, a method, a weapon. His book reached military planners who realized fear could be used to break enemy prisoners. It reached political leaders who learned fear could push entire populations toward obedience. It reached propaganda units who discovered how to take harmless groups, harmless ideas, harmless objects, and attach them to something terrifying, just like Watson did with Albert and the rat. And when you design fear on a national scale, the result is war, violence, hatred, and death. What makes Watson's book so deadly isn't that it told anyone to kill. It's that it explained how to control people so effectively that others used it to justify killing. His ideas helped shape fear-based propaganda in multiple conflicts. They influenced psychological operations used in wartime. They guided leaders who wanted to stir hatred. They fueled manipulation behind some of the deadliest movements of the 20th century. Watson didn't fire any weapons, but his ideas became the blueprint for millions of deaths. Meanwhile, Little Albert simply disappeared. Watson never helped him, never reversed the experiment, never cared about the damage he caused. The baby was returned to his mother as if nothing had happened. For decades, no one knew what became of him. Some researchers traced him to a boy who died at age 6 from a medical condition. If that was the real Albert, then he lived a short life marked by fear he never understood and never deserved. And Watson, who scarred him, continued to defend his work for the rest of his life. The deeper tragedy of the story is how fast Watson's ideas spread. His book became the backbone of advertising, teaching companies how to use fear to sell products. Fear of germs, fear of aging, fear of rejection. It taught politicians how to push emotional buttons. It taught governments how to manipulate public opinion. It taught institutions how to steer crowds without force. Every time a company convinces you that you need something or else something bad will happen, that's Watson's formula. Every time a leader uses fear to gain support, that's Watson's method. Every time a population is made to panic, obey, or hate, the shadow of little Albert is there. Watson believed behavior was predictable. What he didn't predict was the scale of destruction his ideas would unlock. Entire nations learned how to weaponize fear because of him. And when fear becomes a weapon, people die. In war, in riots, in political purges, in mass hysteria, in conflicts fueled by emotional manipulation. The death toll doesn't come from a single moment. It comes from decades of influence, millions of decisions, and countless lives shaped by fear designed from one experiment. It's about influence, the ripple effect. No book in modern psychology has played a bigger role in teaching people how to manipulate emotion on such a massive scale. They reach governments, militaries, corporations, and entire movements. And the moment you teach powerful people how to create fear wherever they want, you create a tool deadlier than any weapon. What makes this story even more disturbing is that Watson wasn't a villain in his own mind. He didn't see himself as dangerous. He saw himself as a scientist. He believed he was discovering truth, not unleashing chaos. And that mindset, cold, clinical, confident, is exactly what made his work so easily misused. He showed the world how emotion could be engineered. Others turned it into a method of control. The scientific community eventually rejected Watson's ethics, but by then, his ideas were everywhere. His book remained in classrooms for decades. His theories became part of mainstream culture. The damage couldn't be undone. And little Albert's screams echoed far beyond the laboratory, spreading into the minds of people who never knew his name. When you look at the experiments done since then, the wars fought with psychological tactics, the governments that maintained control through fear, the populations manipulated by emotional triggers, you can trace the logic back to Watson's work. He built the framework. Others expanded. His book didn't kill, but it taught the world how to make fear deadly. And this leads to the most chilling part of all. Watson's book wasn't the last of its kind. Today, there are books being written right now that could shape the next century the same way his did. Books that teach how to influence crowds, control behavior, predict choices, and shape beliefs. Books that seem harmless until someone powerful decides to use them. History shows that ideas can quietly destroy more lives than weapons, especially when those ideas explain how to manipulate the human mind. One frightened baby, one unethical experiment, one confident scientist, and one book that taught the world how to design fear. The result was a century marked by manipulation, conflict, hatred, control, and death on a scale Watson never imagined. Little Albert became a ghost in psychology, but his influence became a shadow over the modern world. Because once someone learns how to create fear, there's no limit to what they can do with it. And the real question now is, what new ideas are being tested today that might shape or destroy the next 100 years?